operate in truth, right? Operate in truth. Tell the truth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Gator Truth. On this episode, we're going to take a look at the Gators' upcoming trip to the home of the 12th man, Kyle Field, to take on the Texas A&M Aggies. And I've got to say, of all the away trips I've done, A&M is one of the most fun. I put on Twitter earlier this week that there's very few teams that have the pregame pageantry and all the traditions that UF has, like Texas A&M. I liken it to in 2019, my brother and I take our first trip to Death Valley, and we're asking people, hey, what's a pregame tradition we should keep an eye out for? And we really didn't get much. Finally, we got one guy saying, well, the band comes on the field. And we're like, well, that's pretty much all schools. So, all right. But A&M, of course, having their cadets and has a really, really unique band in the way that they perform. Definitely something to check out on YouTube, or if you're going to the game, I would say watch the halftime show. And also one thing I like about A&M as opposed to the Swamp, just to be honest, is refills. When I was there 3 years ago, you buy a cup before the game, and then during the game, you can just go, hey, refill, boom. And you don't have to wait in line, don't have to pay again. Lots of good things there, and just really good time. If you've not made it out to Kyle Field, definitely next time the Gators head out, do so. And maybe I'll feel differently after a night game at Kyle Field, but at least in one of my experiences, one of the better away trips that you can take. I know there are Gator fans sick of playing there. I will say that most of those have just never gone and enjoyed the madness that is a game in Kyle Field. And with that said, enough saying good things about a trip to College Station. Definitely, we're here to talk about the Gators and what could be a pivotal game, to be honest, for the Gators here in 2025. Of course, sitting at 2-3, getting the upset of Texas, even if Texas ends up not being that great, it is still an upset. We were not favored, and it is still a good win over what I believe is at least a quality opponent. The question is, and we'll learn more this week, how great of quality. But from the beginning of the season, I did say what I thought the hardest game on our schedule was this trip to Kyle Field, because this is an A&M team that returns a lot of production, including all 5 offensive linemen. We'll talk about that when we get to defense. And also just one of the tougher road environments in the SEC. And so with that said, let's get into it. What are my keys for the offense? And of course, we're going to start off with the same one we do every week, which is run the ball, which I know many other people have said, other podcasters have said, and of course, it's what people want to see. Last week, Jaden Ball finally gets those 20-plus carries, does really well, and we win the game. Jacoby Jackson is not listed as out. He's listed as questionable, which, to be honest, is fine with me. Not that you want him out, but at least it kind of forces the issue, especially with Duke Clark out. I almost said Clark Duke, the actor. But with him out, it kind of forces Ball to get more carries, which of course is what we want to see. I understand keeping guys fresh, but I also have seen that be overplayed, like at LSU, like against USF, where we're wondering, why is Ball not getting more carries? But with that said, you got to start off with that run game, especially with the way this offense works, and also continuing to see improved offensive line and tight end blocking. One interesting piece of note is that Tony Livingston, our second string tight end, who is the second tight end on most of our 12 personnel, again, for those playing the home game, that's one running back, two tight ends, two wide receivers. He is listed as questionable on the injury report. And with that, it'll be curious to see if we continue to see as much 12 personnel or with like the emergence of Dallas Wilson last week. You've got VB3, Mazzell, who's also listed as questionable. You've got Trey Wilson, TJ Abrams, Tank Hawkins, those guys. And I'm sure I'm leaving people out. But do we see us rely more on the receiving room, or do we see like an Amir Jackson come in and play a lot in that tight end 2 role, which, to be honest, I don't think would be a terrible thing. But when you've got the talent at wide receiver, I do think you need to use it, especially against a team and a defense coached by Mike Elko, the head coach for Texas A&M, of course, being a former defensive coordinator. But also, you've got guys like Coach Chaos, who knows this offense quite well. Before going to A&M last year, he had been at Florida for 2 years, went against this scheme in practice all the time. You also have Jay Bateman, the defensive coordinator, who, again, was here at Florida before leaving to take the DC job at A&M under Elko. Again, familiar with this scheme. And last year, of course, it was 20-0 at the half, in part because they know how to shut it down. Now, it will be a little bit different this time, since you've got a guy like Dallas Wilson out there. You've got DJ Lagway kind of finding his footing. Last year, of course, he was switching in and out with Graham Mertz for the A&M game. But with that said, if you can go into more 11 personnel and you can spread out the formation a little bit more, not put it in a phone booth, as some people will say, that's going to help lead to success. But if you go into that 12 formation, make it a really tight, narrow line of scrimmage, that's where these guys familiar with their system and a defensive coach like Mike Elko could really do damage to you. So we've got to see that improved offensive line and tight end blocking. But also, if Livingston can't go or is limited, use some of number 7. But at the same time, I think it might be a blessing in disguise, and that forces us to use the talent at wide receiver that otherwise we may not be using. And of course, just like last week, we got to hit throws behind the line of scrimmage. Just like I said, we don't want to be playing in a phone booth against a very, very talented defense and a talented defensive coaching staff. I don't want to be in a phone booth as far as depth of throw, because again, last year, 20-0, we weren't really hitting anything, past the line of scrimmage. And part of that was, hey, they know we're going to go horizontal. Last week, we rarely went horizontal against Texas, and we saw the results. So that's what we've got to do. We've got to hit throws behind the line of scrimmage. And like I've already talked about, we've got to take advantage of the wide receiver talent. You've got to take advantage of having a guy like Dallas Wilson, like having a guy like VB3, and even Trey Wilson, who's had a mixed year. Take advantage. There's a reason why he was a freshman All-American 2 years ago before getting injured. If Aiden Mizell can go, I talked about it, Texas game, second drive, ended up with a field goal. Probably if we were running 11 personnel, which is, again, one running back, one tight end, 3 receivers instead of 12 personnel, and you're bringing him across rather than Livingston, he probably leaves his guy in the dust, gets at least the first down on the flood play we saw, and possibly gets in the end zone. And that's what I'm talking about. You've got the wide receiver advantage. You've got guys who are, built with great speed. Take advantage of it. This is a defense I do believe is pretty good. And of course, they're playing at home and it's going to be loud. It's not called the home of the 12th man for nothing. But with that said, this is a defense that can be scored on. This is a defense that can be ran on. I mean, if we look, they allowed 40 points to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is not an offensive juggernaut this year. I know they also put up points on Arkansas, but haven't been, too great outside of their Texas San Antonio, 24 points, although how much of that was scored when the game was in the balance. Utah State, one of the better group of 5 teams, put up 22, but also at the same time, they've held Auburn and a pretty decent Mississippi State team. Again, not top half of the SEC, but much improved Mississippi State team to 9 points. So right now, there is that question of, can Florida get it going? And of course, part of that is if they can, hopefully they keep it going. But that starts with running the ball and having that improved blocking and not getting in a phone booth by throwing beyond the line of scrimmage, by getting into that 11 personnel, which we had so much success the first drive against Texas. On defense, well, just to be honest, on defense, we've got to contain Marcel Reed. Last year caused lots of problems for the Gators with his running game. He is a dual threat. However, passing the ball, he's been inconsistent. And part of that is just he's really good when he can get running and make plays like off, as people say, off schedule or outside of the play. Like if he gets outside of the pocket and he's now got to improvise, that's where he's really good. With that said, he's about 59.7 completion percentage on the year. However, he does do that thing that I have said, I can give away percentage points of the completion if this happens, and that is he is very feast or famine. And I talked about this years ago with AR, in that when he hits a pass, many times it's going to be a big play. Currently 11 TDs, 3 interceptions on the year, and has hit 80-yard touchdowns, has hit 45, 34, and various other long receptions. So even though he's only got 60%, when he does hit it, these aren't throws to the boundary that get like 2-3 yards and put up 80% completion percentage. These are throws that, hey, if he gets them, it's a big play. It's going to put the defense on their back heels. But if you can contain him from, like I said, getting outside the pocket, getting to improvise, guys having to get open and weird things happen, when that happens, kind of gets you out of your main defense. If you can keep him in that pocket and just surround him and collapse the pocket on him, that's where he's inconsistent. He's not a guy that will just sit in the pocket and destroy you. And if he does, fine. But it's much better than giving him the chance to run down the field and get a 20, 30, 40-yard scramble on you. I mean, we had Arch Manning get a 36-yard run last week. The last thing we want is a guy even bigger and faster, running downfield for 30, 40 yards and doing it at home to really get the fans into it. So I would much rather see what we saw last week, where we can contain, have a spy, where we have a linebacker just set to watch Reed and then come in and rush. If it looks like he's not going to be escaping the pocket, that's what we need to do first, is contain Reed, make him a pocket passer. And if you can do that, you're already on a good trajectory. I mean, last week, Mississippi State had them going well for first half, and unfortunately second half, few big plays, got it away. Auburn, when they lost, I mean, yes, there were, Auburn, Concepcion had 113 yards receiving, and Marcel Reed 15 and 22. However, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. And some of that is just the feast or famine that we're talking about, but Auburn really contained Texas A&M. Granted, when Auburn was basically down 13-3, it was a 2-score game. A&M knew they could rely on their defense at home and didn't have to force the issue. But if our offense is, clicking and able to get points and force the issue, well, then that'll force, Reed to have to play, I don't want to say play hero ball, but have to try and make more plays than they generally try and have them make in the passing game that is just sitting back and throwing. Second thing I need to see is solid run defense. And with that solid run defense, you got to stop both running backs because Moss and Bell, their 2 top running backs, Owens, sorry, not Bell. Le'Veon Moss, I think Le'Veon Bell. Moss and Owens, their top 2 backs, have each in the last 2 weeks. 1 week, 2 weeks ago against Auburn, I believe Moss was the one to have a 100+ yard rushing game. Last week against Mississippi State, Owens was the one to have a 100+ yard rushing game. And if we can have the type of run defense that we saw for the most part against Miami, what we saw against LSU, what we saw against Texas, then that'll be great. Now, both these running backs also average per carry. Moss, the main running back, who's got 65 carries, 5.3 yards per carry. Owens, who's number 2, but again, put up 100 yards last week, 7.1 yards per carry on 39 carries. That's really good. And of course, just to bring in Marcel Reed's dual threat numbers, this includes sack yards, but 38 carries, 149 yards. That's 3.9 yards per carry. But then when you look at the 47 yards taken away on 6 sacks, you can do the math for that. 32 carries for 196 yards. So over 4 yards per carry when you don't factor in sack yards. So again, things to keep an eye out for. And the last thing I'll say is just like against Texas, we've got to see the disciplined defense. Part of that, again, is not letting Reed, have time to improvise and, kind of throw out the defense because everyone's now worried about he's about to scramble and you lose track of a receiver because they've got Craver, they've got Concepcion. Both are great receivers, especially Craver. Craver, of course, currently not even halfway through the season. They've only played 5 games, has 550 yards receiving. He's on pace to go over 1,000 yards. And then Concepcion, not far behind him. Craver with 30 receptions. Concepcion with 24. He has 401 receiving yards. So got to keep an eye on those guys. No other receiver on the team has more than 9 receptions. Now, that doesn't mean they can't cause a problem or their backs out of the backfield can cause a problem, but they've got 2 main guys in receiving. And the last thing you want is you lose track of a guy because you let Reed get outside the pocket, and now he's got a big, easy throw for a massive, explosive play. And that's the thing with this Texas A&M offense, from what I've seen, what I've heard, is that they can be explosive, but it's almost a feast or famine situation against some of these teams. like the first half against Mississippi State versus the second half of the game against Mississippi State. And then, of course, we've talked about the running backs, Moss and Bell. Again, you got to be disciplined. You got to maintain your gaps, and you got to tackle. That is one problem that the Gators have had on and off, and that's missed tackles. Only 3, I believe, were missed against Texas. And I think it was Miles Graham when asked what he thought about 3 missed tackles, and he was like, that's 3 more than there should be. But hey, it's a lot better than times we've seen double-digit missed tackles from Gator defense in recent years. So got to give a lot of credit there, at least to the attitude of Miles Graham. And then finally, let's go ahead and let's talk about the things I want to see from the team in general. Again, I want to see few penalties and no special teams flags. I'm sick of special teams flags and no silly penalties. We didn't really have many last week. Continue not to have those, although we did have the hands to the face. And again, as I said in the Texas review, sometimes things just happen. So I'm not going to be as picky on that one in particular, but it was a big moment in the game, and it did give 15 yards to give Texas a hope of tying the game. But let's not see that. Also, with few penalties, I said overcome the 12th man. That could be one in general. That could be penalties, just for offense. Not seeing false starts, or on defense, not, getting too amped, too hyped up and jumping off sides or anything like that. Generally, just be disciplined. And then this one again returns from last week, and that's to start strong. If you get behind in most away games in the SEC, it's going to be a hill to climb out of, especially when you've got a fan base of a team that's 5-0 and driven and looking to have their best SEC season ever. The Aggies are staring it down, to be honest. And I'll look at their schedule real quick. They've got us. They've got a Bobby Petrino Arkansas after us. They've got an LSU team that you've heard me say I think is overrated. Some people will agree with that. Some people will not. If Clemson didn't implode and be the team that we're seeing now with 3 losses and possibly more on the way, if they're a general Clemson team, they would have beaten LSU. If we, could have played halfway decent offense and done more beyond the line of scrimmage, not thrown 5 picks, and been generally poor ourselves, there was an opportunity for us to beat LSU. But anyways, I say that, and that A&M shown to be, at least at this point, better than the 2 of us. So they've got us, they've got Arkansas, they've got that LSU, then they go to Missouri. They've got a decent South Carolina team. Then they've got Samford, and then they've got Texas. There's a real shot that if they beat us, and I speak to this for the motivation of the fans, going nuts. Granted, they do have a 3 straight away game after us, 2 in a row, and then a bye week, then at Missouri. But there's a real shot here right now for A&M, if they beat us, to go 12-0, 11-1 at worst, make their first playoffs. And I think that's going to make this a lot crazier environment for the Gators to play in. So again, it's important. Got to start strong because you don't want the crowd getting into it, especially when they've got that motivation. And then also keep in mind, this is a revenge game. This game was over at halftime, no matter what the score looks like. I think it ended up 33-20 without looking up last season, but it was never even that close. We put up points in what essentially was garbage time. It's got to be revenge. Last year against against Texas A&M, you had fans booing a DUI ad because they were so mad. You got embarrassed. Now it's time for you to go return the favor. Just like you returned the favor last week against Texas, you got to return the favor this week against the Fighting Elkos, the Aggies of Texas A&M, get that first win over a winning team, because I can tell you this team's gonna, even if they implode, they're probably going to beat Samford to get to 6 wins, and I bet you they get one more. So this is a team that will finish with a winning record for sure. Get your first win over a winning team on the road in the Billy Napier era, by treating it like a revenge game, by doing what we need to do on offense, by not letting Reed's athleticism beat you. But yeah, and keep in mind, keep that edge of, hey, they embarrassed us last year. Let's ruin what looks to be their best season in years. And then also, just because I do like how special teams change games last week, we didn't get a big return on a kickoff or punt, but we actually went for a block on a punt and blocked it. May have gotten unlucky. That ended up just a safety. But hey, I'll take it. But definitely want to see a big special teams play. So maybe I should say big special teams play rather than return on kickoff or punt. But we really had not tried blocking anything. So that's why return's still there. But good with that. And then again, talking about a lot of things, backs against the wall. You're still 2-3. You're still fighting for bowl eligibility. I know they're on X, at least there's a lot of questions about what if this happens, what if that happens. Well, it doesn't matter what the what ifs are. What matters is you lose that 4th game this week. There's a high chance you got a 5th, 6-1 coming. But this is one that not only do you win, but you feel really good about it. And you actually keep momentum for multiple games, something that really hasn't happened in the Billy Napier era. And then probably if you win this, you'll probably win against Mississippi State, and you end up 4-3 going to the bye week with Georgia. A little bit different feel than if you go into that bye week 3-4 and feeling like, oh, we've still got Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and FSU. You go in with that winning, and it's like, okay, we're 4-3. We need 2 of the last 5 to make a bowl, which I don't think is the standard at all this year. But for our seniors, I would love to do that, because this senior class we talked about is going to end up having the worst record or any senior class in Gator football since Spurrier arrived. And I would love to see them go out with at least getting a bowl game and getting that experience, because of everything they have dedicated to this program for the last 4 or 5 years. Or, even the guys like Caleb Banks, who came in more recently to try and turn this thing around. And it all starts here in College Station, because I think if you lose this game, then I do think it starts to turn the momentum. And then there's questions about, okay, what are you going to do with Mississippi State, as they've got possibly a better offense than most teams. But you can end all that noise just by winning in College Station, which is easier said than done. With that said, what's my prediction for the Gators taking on the Aggies? Well, I will say this. Wearing my national champion shirt last time I was in Texas to cheer on the Gators, flew into Houston, flew out of Austin, hit one of the 4 corners of the I guess you could call it a parallelogram. That is San Antonio, Austin, College Station, and Houston. Doing it again, flying into Houston, flying out of Austin. Maybe for good luck, just like the national title game. So anything that can help us out, right? Sports is superstition, as I've said plenty. But with that said, I do think this is a chance for the defense to come in, show up, show out, just like they've done before. And I think this defense is better than Auburn's defense. I think this defense is deeper than Mississippi State's defense because, Mississippi State basically at halftime game flips. I think there's a chance here for us to hold, 21 points or less. The question is, can we overcome the Mike Elko and company defense? And I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say a very 2006 score. If you know, I'm going to give this one 17-16 to the Gators. Comment below if you're watching on YouTube. Comment below what special game I am referencing with that 17-16 final score on the road. And with that said, it's going to be a fun trip to College Station. I'll catch you guys on the flip side. I will have my picks from Texas now, whether they're in an airport, at somewhere in College Station, outside Kyle Field. I don't know right now, but there will be picks on the YouTube page this week. With that said, thank you all for listening. And as always, go Gators.